think that with legacy venues, the biggest issue is that you just get super comfortable. You're so excited about it. They still love it. They're still invested. They're still serving their clients in a great way, but you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if the one thing I have learned over these 10 years, and that I got schooled in very quickly, was I thought that once you figured out the puzzle, you could just set it and forget it. It's like, I put the puzzle together, I'm going to put glue on it, I'm going to frame it, and I'm going to hang it in my office. I have figured it out. This is how it's going to go. And that's not true, because we're dealing with people. We're dealing with humans. Like every 5-10 years, every generation is different. The way that they want to be communicated with, the way that they want to connect with the business is different. So how we served our clients in 2019 and 2018 absolutely does not work with how we serve our clients in 2024. I think it allows you to be able to look at things objectively and not be emotional about them, and recognize that it may not be the person, it could just be the process that's failing, and being able to really figure out how to tweak it to make it better.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
What is up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX. And on this show, we do so many different types of shows. We have conversations with venue owners. We have conversations with venue pros. Today, we have a opportunity to talk to someone who's been on the show before. She owns a venue. She provides educational resources for venue owners. And I am so excited to be talking to her today about a number of different topics that I know that you're going to find meaningful and valuable as you're on your venue journey. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dana Kadwell back to the show. Dana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on here.
So this is going to be pretty neat because, I have to give a little bit of a backstory first. So we were in Las Vegas just a couple weeks ago, and I go to this party with Sarah. Actually, I was pretty tired. I was like gonna not go, and then I was like, oh, and Sarah said, oh, you should come. It's gonna be great. And so I went to Chandelier Bar, and then I saw you and I'm like, gosh, you look so familiar. And we were talking with Sarah and we were like, where do I know you from? And we're trying to piece it together. And you literally came on the show in season 3. And so that was really funny, but we put 2 and 2 together and we figured it out.
It just felt like a lifetime ago. Like seriously, felt like a lifetime ago. So I totally understand why, but same. I didn't put it together until you said it. So, and I'm normally really good with faces and names. So
totally. Well, we were both standing there like, you look familiar. You look from, where do we know each other from? And it was like the podcast for sure. So I would love to hear, you've got some really exciting things coming up, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And we're going to get into some meat and potatoes for venue owners as well. But what have you been up to? Like since, season 3 for us was maybe 2 years ago? It's 2024 right now. Yeah. In the last couple of years, like how's your venue? Like just kind of give us an update.
Yeah. I think it's been a crazy 2 years. I felt like at 2022, we had really found our stride. Like we were just rocking and rolling. We had a really rocky 2019 going into the pandemic, just like employee wise. And that's really God is passionate talking about teams and management and understanding like how you could have a thriving team. So we found ourselves in 2022, like in a great spot. And then as every business does, it kind of goes in these peaks and valleys. And as the market was changing, we had to like quickly change how we were marketing, how we were serving our clients. And so, it's been a really interesting 2 years. It has been some of like the most growth I've ever had. And the venue has seen so much growth because of it. Cause I think it forced us to get out of the easy pandemic booking, right? Not saying the pandemic was easy, but booking post-pandemic, like you just didn't have to work hard for it. It just happened because there were so many events. And it has really created such a great team, a great process. And it's been just a wonderful ride so far for the venue side of it. And it really got me super passionate about it because we just celebrated 10 years 2 weeks ago at the Bradford, which is crazy. It's crazy. Like I have these pictures of my son who was 2, my daughter who was 4, and it just like, I don't know. It's just, they're sitting in the steps of the Bradford in construction and they're just sitting there and you're like, oh my God, they were so little. This is all they've ever known. But it's just insane to think about. And I was like thinking back on it and just thinking like how lucky we've been and how like much success we've had. And it really got me wanting to just do something more for the venue owner community, just having so many conversations with people. And that's when we started the masterclass. And so that's coming up in January. And that's where I've been like pouring a lot of my time and energy. And I could do that because of what we're going to be talking about today is getting back to that, CEO level of my business. But, yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been so neat. Like, it's just been such a joy, like connecting with not only the educators, but all the venue owners, and so excited for the community that we're going to see in January. And yeah, so it's been an odd, a curvy path I didn't know it was going to take, honestly.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the masterclass, and I really want to highlight that. And we're going to have links for that in the description. These aren't like affiliate links, nothing like that. This is 100% just me being really excited about, what you're doing for the venue owner community. I think, I think there are more educational resources today available for venue owners than there ever have been, but I think that's a good thing. And I think we have room for more. And certainly when there are these master classes, and especially what you're doing. So like, I love what you're doing because it's not come show up and listen to a huge seminar in a large lecture hall and you kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit and walk away maybe feeling inspired, but maybe you've got a list of notes and a stack of business cards like I have here from Wedding MBA, but what you're doing is really like actionable. Can you break down a little bit of like specifically what you're doing upcoming in January?
Yeah. So it was really important to me that everything was some kind of workshop style, because I go to conferences all the time. I speak at conferences all over the nation, and they're great. And conferences are meant to connect and inspire and motivate. But for me as a venue owner, when I had to step away from my business and go learn something, I needed to be able to start working on that right away because I was losing 2 days of work basically, right? So I wanted to be able to go into these sessions and start like changing my SEO, and then I get a roadblock and be like, hey, like, how did you do this? How did you get there? So being able to actually finish a task or start a task or do something that's actually going to move you forward as opposed to just listening to it. And that was really, really important to me. So I wouldn't say it's hard, but I had to really be mindful of who I was picking to come to speak and talk because, there's tons of educators out there, but I really wanted a group that felt just as passionate about that as I was, and they were going to be delivering that to the attendee. So that's what I'm most excited about because one, like I love learning, like I am a lifelong learner. I love education. It is my jam. I went to school to be a teacher. So I really love learning, and I'm just so excited for all the things that I know that I'm going to learn being in those rooms.
That's so cool. Well, I'm really excited about it. If you are listening to this or watching this right now and you're interested in going, I think you still have a couple of tickets left. So I want to make sure that this group and our audience has a chance to go do that. That's going to be super neat. I love it. I'm so grateful that you're doing something like this. And we really connected. My vision is for Weeva to do some more workshop type things. I'm passionate obviously about the education space as well. And so this was really cool. Today, what we're going to be talking about is this shift from CEO and, the kind of like, when we think of business, we think of someone who's not wearing all the hats. Maybe they're just wearing a couple of the hats and they have people under them or around them that are doing things. As venue owners, it's very difficult to get out of the weeds and into that position. So I want to dive into that today. And one of the things also that comes to mind is we're all about making a change for the better. We're constantly changing in our lives, right? But it's a question of, are we changing for the worse or are we changing for the better? And so I think this topic, especially if you are, whether you're a new venue owner or whether you're 5-10 years in business, how do we get out of the place that we're doing all the seats so you can actually step away to go to the venue masterclass or to go to Wedding MBA or go to Wedding Insight or go to some of these things to pour back into your business. So let's dive into it. You've clearly gone through some of this transformation from just being in your business 24/7, to being able to step back a little bit more so you can focus on these other things. What was the biggest hurdle, maybe even very early on, that you encountered when you were trying to step back from wearing all the hats?
Yeah, I think it's control. I think it was really trusting that I could give it up to somebody else. There was, when you, especially as a venue owner, you've poured everything you had into it. And for me, I poured literally everything I had into it. My whole financial future was literally in those bricks. on that land. And so to me, the failure of it was just would have been catastrophic. So when you get to the point where you're like, okay, like I know that I can't do this, like I'm not fulfilling what I need to be doing and I need to hire whatever, there was a very paralyzing fear that I was going to hire the wrong person, or they weren't going to sell it as well as I could, or I'm going to trust this person and maybe I shouldn't have, and it's going to fail, or they're not going to do it the way that I want to do it. That was really what held me back the most. And even as we hired, it's what held me back from being a good boss. Because I wanted to control it so much. And I really didn't allow that room for like creative growth within my employees. And it created some friction and it was tough. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And I think that's not abnormal. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think it's abnormal at all. And I know I've experienced that. I think there's possibly two camps of people here. Those that echo that sentiment and they say, gosh, that's me. I couldn't give up control over XYZ role, whatever it is. There are also maybe another camp of people that say, I'm ready to give it up. I am done. I do not want to do it. Bring someone in. And so that kind of leads me to my question. How do you know who you should hire and when you should hire?
Well, okay, so that's a very loaded question. Let's start with the when, because I think that's the biggest thing. I think that it's different for every person. But to me, it was very much the point when I felt like I could no longer grow my business. Like my business was super stagnant. And, when you talk about being an entrepreneur, like you think about all the steps you went to. You had the idea, you did all the permitting, you built the building, whatever it was. You had a vision, you forecasted into the future, you had your 5-year business plan, you had all of these things, and all along, all you could think of was, yes, get through the day, get through the week, get through the month, but you were thinking, okay, this is what we're going to do this year, and then next year we're going to do this, and then we're going to add this. And there got to a point when I stopped doing that because I was so stuck in just surviving the day and just surviving the week and just surviving the month that I couldn't even think of what I could do next year that was different or exciting or new. And so what we saw was a plateau, and it was a great plateau. I mean, I could have stayed on that plateau for a while and been okay, honestly. Like it wasn't like, a failure or anything like that, but I realized we weren't growing. Like, and to me, if you're not growing, you're not changing, you're not evolving, you're staying stagnant, and eventually that stagnant, you're just going to go down. So that's where I was like, okay, I really need to get out of this, get out of like this day-to-day grind, like soul sucking grind is what it felt like. But making that decision, okay, well, how do I do this? And going through the whole hiring process is super daunting, but I luckily had some really great business owners around me that I like kind of created what I called my board of directors. And I was like, hey guys, like I need to get out of this. What should I do? How should I get there? And the best advice I ever gave, and I give it to every single person, is do not hire a single person until you have a process for everything. And that I just can't even describe was like my saving grace, because I had no idea that everything even had a process. Like, in your mind, like, like, okay, this is how I schedule the cleaners. So I do maintenance, but like it's all lives in your head. And I hadn't written it down. I hadn't really created the SOP or the process for it. But once I created the processes for all the different pieces, I was able to really see, okay, this is what this job description looks like, and be able to kind of mold those job descriptions from there. And then you're able to create kind of like what I call your avatar for your employee, and, see who's going to fit that the best. So, I think everyone has a different like breaking point, but for me, it was definitely like not dreaming, because that's who I am. Like I'm a dreamer. Like I constantly want to be moving and evolving. And that was when I was like, you know what? Something's not right here.
Is there a best practice around who you should hire? Is there maybe a cadence of this type of position before a different type of position? What's your guidance on that?
It's a great question. Okay, so I'm a firm believer that no one size fits all here. I believe that you should hire the thing that is bogging you down the most, or the thing that you are the least equipped with. So I remember when I was starting, there's this, I've told the story before, but my husband sent me this video, and it's of this man who invented a razor for bald men. And it's like he had a prototype and he had like 200, and he hired like 3 or 4 guys to go out and sell this razor. And the guys came back and they sold like 5 or 10. And he's like, what is going on? And so he goes out and he sells like 100 of them, right? And his whole point of the story is like, no one can sell your business like you can. Like, you should be the one doing sales. And I believed that with every being of my soul. And I lived by that. And we did hire sales, was one of the last things we eventually hired. But sales was not what I was good at. That was not what I was great at. I was great at networking. I was great at the systems. I was great at the admin. I was great at creating the marketing plans. Like, that was my jam. And the minute we finally hired a salesperson, our sales went through the roof, because that's what the place that I was lacking the most. And so when I'm telling somebody, it's like, maybe you're the best salesperson because like you're killing it, then for sure, hang on to that last. Hire all the other things that are bogging you down so you could do the thing that is bringing your business the most money. And for me, what brought our businesses the most money was the organization, like figuring out how to actually run it, how to maximize our profits, maximize our cash flow. That's where I was valuable and wasn't sitting in the sales. That makes sense.
It makes so much sense. So it sounds like what you're saying is contextual to who you are as a human inside your business. You should hire in terms of the priority of things that allow you to do that piece that you're best at the longest.
Yeah. And one of the things I recommend to people is take 2 weeks and write down everything you do, like literally everything you do. Nothing is too small. And then you kind of go through that list and figure out what is the thing that like I love, that brings you joy and that like you want to do, what brings you into the office every day. And you don't want to give that up. And then what's the thing that like is you just hate, right? And sometimes the things you hate is the things you have to keep. Like, that is the truth. Like, I hate taxes, but I have to keep that. Like, I can't like offload, the tax part of it, right? So there's some of those things, but then you can really find the things that are like really just like dragging you down. And sometimes you could just take even those 1 or 2, 3 tasks off your plate, the amount of relief you feel and the amount of like just happiness and lightness you feel even makes that thing that you love to do, like you do it 10 times better at the end of the day.
Absolutely. This whole idea of auditing what you're doing, transferring it to someone else, and then filling your time is something that I got from a book that I've been reading, and just like really wanting to find the ways that I can do this process, because you're 100% right. It totally, like those things that weigh on you really heavy that you're maybe not great at, it totally steals the joy out of the stuff that you want to do, right? Yeah, I love that. So let's talk for a minute, and I want the video team to clip this up, but let's talk for a minute about if you are a venue manager or a sales manager inside of an organization, and your boss is maybe the owner, and now they come back from a conference, or they come back from your master class, right? And now all of a sudden they're talking about systems and talking about writing everything down, and maybe you have been that key employee that everything is in your head, right? Should an employee be scared about writing all this stuff down? Does this mean that they're going to lose their job because now they aren't the key holder of all the information?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So that's a really great question. I've never heard that question before, but I could see how that's a valid fear, but no, I don't think so at all, because I think that number one, it shows your expertise in it. And the thing is what I say processes, and we talk about SOPs. So for example, like when I am doing like a workflow for a client, right? I have a very specific way and tone in how I interact with that client. There is for our company, there is a must, like you must follow these 4 steps, but how you do those steps is very unique to you. And the reason why that person is so successful is because it's unique to them. Like, I don't want clones. Like, I don't want a robot doing the job, because that's not what our clients want. They want that very personal, relationship, that warm hospitality. And so process is really meant just to provide that skeleton for you. And the way we do it is we give you the process. You have to do the process as written for 3 months. And after 3 months, you say, hey, like I can tweak this. I want to do it this way. I want to change it. As long as your outcome is the same and it aligns with all the goals that we have, like you're allowed to tweak that process. And so now in like our employee handbook for like one process, there could be like 5 different ways that you could do it that were tried and true by other employees. But I think what it does is it really allows even your boss to see what it is that you do. Because sometimes you really don't have any idea of all the steps that your employee is taking. Like, I think it was when I was talking to our venue manager, and she was telling me all the ways that she handles the cleaners. And to me, it's like, oh, you have a schedule, you check in with the cleaners, whatever. And she's like, No. She's like, there is this whole process to make sure they show up on time, that they're there. There's a way that they check in. How do I tell them, like, when I want them to really focus on, like, I was up there the other day and I really want to focus on the windowsills. Like, there's this whole process to make sure that this venue looks top notch every single second of the day. And I had like no idea. And I was like, wow, like that's insane that you do that. And I love that. Like, but she came up with that because I just gave her a skeleton. I was like, here's the calendar. Here's how you connect with them. Here's how we check in. Here's how we pay the invoice. Right. And she's the one who added in all the other things that made that process 10,000 times better. So, and to me, like that's an employee that I want to keep because she's invested. She's showing that she cares. She's improving the process at the end of the day. And it's making my business 10 times better than what I could have done.
That's so powerful. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. You know, one of the biggest, I think, inhibitors of growth is black boxing or siloing information. And that's something that we've come into contact with frequently because, you know, we manage venues. We've got 9 venues now over a bunch of different states. And if you have someone who is harboring information and they're not willing to share the process, you know, that's very challenging to effectively run an organization because the success or failure of the entire thing runs off of that person being in that seat.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question that's on my mind here that, you know, maybe someone's listening to this right now and they have a family venue that's been in their family for years and years, right? It's kind of a legacy thing. Does a venue like that need systems and processes, or is that going to make it feel too corporate?
No, not at all. I mean, yes, I do not think it's making it feel corporate at all. I think processes, like, and I did not actually realize this until a couple years ago when, they always, my office jokes, they're like, I'm the SOP person. Like everything has an SOP, like how you take your break is an SOP. Like they just hassle me about it all the time. But we got into this place where it was really hard to start measuring their success. Like sales is super easy to measure success, right? Like you hit your sales goal, whatever. And when you're talking about our client care person, like sure, you can measure success by 5-star ratings that we get, but there's certain parts of the job that you can't measure their success. Like, you know, because you're measuring, it's an emotional thing. Like, are they being creative? Well, how do you know they're being creative? Like, that's not a way to like determine, like, how do you determine that? That's very, you know,
You're like measuring art. It's like, how do you measure art? Yeah.
And so what we started doing is the processes that really had to do with job descriptions, very specific job descriptions. We started putting some kind of way to measure the success of that specific process. And what it did is it allowed me to really see where my person was excelling. It allowed me to see what was working and what wasn't working well, like saying like, okay, like we have this, you know, specific way that we handle, you know, like our Instagramming or whatever. And we're not seeing that growth that we're supposed to be seeing. And taking a look at it, is it the way that we are approaching it? Is it a creative issue? Like it allows us to really kind of dissect exactly what is happening, and really start taking tweaks. Okay, let's change this and see how that outcome happens. Okay, let's change this and see how that outcome happens. And I think that with legacy venues, the biggest issue is that you just get super comfortable. It becomes, and I don't want to say comfortable, like you're so excited about it. They still love it. They're still invested. They're still serving their clients in a great way, but you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if the one thing I have learned over these 10 years and that I got schooled in very quickly was I thought that once you figured out the puzzle, you could just set it and forget it. It's like, I've put the puzzle together. I'm going to put glue on it. I'm going to frame it and I'm going to hang it in my office. I have figured it out. This is how it's going to go. And that just isn't that's not true because we're dealing with people. We're dealing with humans. Like every 5-10 years, every generation is different. The way that they want to be communicated with, the way that they want to connect with the business is different. So how we served our clients in 2019 and 2018 absolutely does not work with how we serve our clients in 2024. And we saw that in 2023. We started seeing those like, why is there so much friction? Like, why are we having so many issues? And it's because we never changed with how the world changed, right? The world changed through the pandemic. And we just said, oh, this was great in 2019. This is amazing. This worked great. And we were proven it was fine in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Well, 2023, people were like, well, I have choices now. Like, I don't have to just like blindly pick a venue. I can actually be very particular and I'm going to start caring about every single tiny thing and how they communicate and what they do. And so I think it allows you to be able to look at things objectively and not be emotional about them and recognize that it may not be the person. It could just be the process that's failing, and being able to really figure out how to tweak it to make it better.
Let me ask about the process. And let's say someone's listening to this and they have a way that they do it, their SOP, and maybe they tell their sales manager, they tell their venue manager, here, this is how I'd like it done. Maybe even they take a page out of your book and say, hey, you're going to do it this way for 3 months. But let's just say that system doesn't work. Or maybe even post the 3-month period, it's like, this system's not working out. What's the process for changing it? Does the system change? What should we do?
Being humble. There have been plenty of times I have failed at writing a process that it made so much sense in my head, and it made so much sense when I did it. And a lot of it was because my time was different. The way I spent my time was different. So the way I structured the things that I did was different. So, and then when I'm talking to my full-time employee, they're like, yeah, the way that you did this made sense for you because you had exactly, 15 minutes to do it, but I have more time to do it. And I think this is a better process. Like, I'm getting better results by spending more time on this and by, having a better template for this and having this extra check-in with the client or whatever the case may be. But I have failed a lot on that. Like, I think you just can't be afraid to say that, hey, this process didn't work. The important thing is that you recognize that it needs some kind of structure, and then to have the conversation with the team to help create that structure. There have been times when, I've had employees say, like, this doesn't work, it's stupid or whatever. And I'm like, is that really the case? Or is it just, you're just salty about this and you just don't want to do it? And so it's not throwing the baby out the bathwater. So it's, talking to the other employees and like having someone else try the process or whatnot. And then really just kind of getting to the result. Is it that it's failing, or is it just that employee just doesn't want to do it that way? And then you have to have some hard conversations at the end of the day.
I was going to ask, have you ever had to terminate an employee over their failure to follow an SOP or just their resistance against going down this SOP path?
Yes. And it's not because of the fact that I want it done my way. And this is counterintuitive to what I just said in the very beginning, that I like to have control of things. But it's because there are certain things, there are just certain parts of how we run our business that is imperative that everybody follows. And it could be as big as how we treat other people. It could be as big as a simple, like, how we make sure that our people are paying on time so that we can pay our assistants. And it could be something as kind of, in the middle of, like, how do we, like, when we're talking about our wedding planning company that we have, like, how do we interact with our clients in a way that makes them feel, safe and secure, and that we're on their team and we're their advocates. And there's lots of ways that we do that, and trying to build that relationship, which is hard. That's the biggest piece of being in the wedding industry is you want to form a relationship with them. You want to have that connection. But when you have 200 clients, how do you have a connection with 200 people, right? And so there's just this very nuanced way to do it. And so there's certain people in the past who've just been like, just don't want to follow the rules. And it goes from one extreme to the other, like whether they just don't want to do it and they don't do it, or that's what I call going rogue in like the nicest way possible. That, like, for example, I had this employee that would always go like above and beyond for her clients. And this sounds crazy that I didn't like this. At the time I was like, whatever, that's fine. Like, I don't care. Like, that's your time. But what it did is it caused so much failure on every other person on the team, because any referral we got from that client expected that same level of above and beyond that we could not deliver on. Like, we just couldn't deliver on it every single time. And so then they had this expectation that we then could not meet. And then it caused this whole like world of resentment for that planner who decided to make the decision for every other person on the team how we were going to service our clients. And so now we have what we call the I love you so much and I really want to give you something extra process, that like, if we want to go above and beyond for a client, we as a team decide what that looks like. And we change it every year. Sometimes it stays the same, but everyone's in agreement to it. So every client gets that same experience. It doesn't feel like we can't rise to the expectation.
Pardon the interruption, I wanted to take a moment and share with you about WEVA. WEVA stands for Wedding and Event Venue Association, and it is a professional association custom built for venue owners and operators. We felt like there was a lack of resources, community, education, and networking available specifically for our industry. And so we recently started this association, and it's been growing by the day. We would love to extend an invite to you, so please click the link in the description or wherever you're watching this video, and we would love to welcome you into the community.
I love this. And the coolest part about this conversation is that you are in ops, and I can relate so much to what you're saying, because these are struggles that we've had. I have had to terminate employees over resistance on this, or like even when we go into a new venue that we're starting to manage, a lot of resistance to, hey, we're going to implement these SOPs. And they're like, no, we've been fine. We don't we're good. Yeah, exactly. And no, thank you. Yeah, we're going to pass on that. And I'm like, no, it's not really negotiable.
I got it. Yeah.
Let's get really nitty gritty here. We want to make a change for the better in our businesses. And I think a part of that is practical application. I know you're passionate about that also because of the masterclass and the way you're setting that up. How do we actually, like, I know we're saying set up SOPs, but how do we actually set up an SOP? Like, give us the practical steps that you go about creating something like this.
So there's a couple of ways, but and I'm happy to send out a template for anyone listening. I'll send that to you. You can send it out. But the biggest thing the first thing I do is it's just a simple doc, right? It's not anything fancy. On the first like part of it, I tell the purpose. Like, why do we have this? Like, what is the reason? And it's not because I said so. It's like, because this is the outcome we want, right? So, and it's very important to really create the why, which I have found so much with employees, is because you've hired that employee because they have the same values as your company, because they're invested in it. And the more transparent you are about why you're doing these things, they're so much more invested. Like, one of our processes we have is with touring, and I explain the why. Like, here's why we had this, because we want to show our clients that we are warm, we are hospitable, and we are inclusive. Those are our 3 core values, and so this is how we're going to show that. And for my salesperson, who's like the biggest heart teddy bear ever, she's like, yes, that's exactly what I want, so she's going to do all these things. So we always explain the why. And then we just write out the process. And it sounds so silly and so stupid sometimes. You're like, do I really have to write out every single step? Now, it's not like the take out a knife, put in the peanut butter. Like, it's not that specific, right? It's more of
the peanut butter story, yes.
for most things. But it's more of just writing out the steps that the person needs to do the job. And sometimes it's not about sequential steps, right? So like touring isn't necessarily sequential. It's just like, here are the things we want to make sure that happens on this tour. And then you have, okay, and here's what we're going to do at the end of the tour. And then we always put how do we know we were successful? What's our measure of success? We put their like KPI or what their goals are, or whatever it is related to that process. And then we review it quarterly. Like, how are we doing on this? And that allows us to see, okay, what process do we need to take a look at that's not working out well? But it's super simple. I've also done a lot of looms. I do a ton of looms because people just don't like to read either. And so sometimes just either they have it in writing and then they also can see it. That's super helpful. If it's a tactical thing, like the tour, like I just did an example of me touring. Like, this is what I mean when I say we're going to do this. Because sometimes...
Was that just like selfie style video, like on your phone kind of thing?
I had someone follow. It wasn't selfies. I had someone, like, as I was giving the tour, and say, hey, like, here's where we're going to sit down. And like, one of the things that like I feel very passionate about with our clients is that they go to any wedding person, and then they sit down and says like, oh my gosh, how'd you guys meet? How did you propose? And it's the same story over and over and over again. And it feels like that person is only invested in this one part of your life, right? Which is a big part. It's big, right? But for me, I want to know who you are. Like, so we're going to sit down at the table. We're going to have some snacks. If you want some champagne, I'll have that for you too. And we're going to talk about like, hey, where did you grow up? Like, tell me what school you went to. What do you do for a living? Like, what were you doing earlier today? Like, really trying to get to the heart of who they are, because not only does that make them feel like, oh, this person cares about me, because I do care about you more than just your wedding, but then it also allows me to sell to them in a way that I understand them more. So when I'm listening to them talk about like their struggles, with school and whatnot, like maybe it's a financial thing, like then when I'm selling to them, I'm gonna be telling them all the ways that like I can help make this wedding a reality, and help with their budget or whatever the case may be. Like I'm really speaking to the thing that they care about, or we're like joking about Schitt's Creek the entire time, which is my favorite thing to joke about because I love that TV show. But you're just kind of creating that connection. And then sometimes they don't choose you, right? And sometimes you're not the venue, but they've had such a positive experience. They tell somebody else about it and that other person books you. So I can't tell you how many times that has happened. And they just didn't book because the date wasn't there or it didn't work out. But then their best friend gets married there because they're like, oh my gosh, this is like the best place. They're like the kindest people. I had the most wonderful tour and it didn't work out. You should book them. And they come and they basically they're ready to sign on the dotted line before I even gave them a tour. So it's just like, it's things like that. So like going through that process. And when you say that to your employees, like, hey, I want you to sit and have a conversation. They're like, okay, cool. Let's sit and have a conversation. But showing them what I mean by that and talking through what that process looks like, they just get it. It just clicks a little bit faster for them.
That's so huge. It's cool that you're mentioning the kind of the process that you go through, how you show it first and then you have the person follow it, I'm assuming. Do you have any sort of like release process where you show it and then you shadow them and then you kind of like what's the cadence that you train them with to make sure that they are going to follow the process?
So it really depends on what it is. But like something like sales, we go through it together. I shadow them for a little bit. And then I just do like kind of pop-ins as well, just to kind of make sure they're not just on their best behavior when I'm standing beside them, that, and it's staying consistent. But everything else, it just depends on how long it takes for the person to get it. Like, I think that's part of it too, is there isn't this like, your onboarding, your training should take 2 weeks. I mean, for one person, it could take 5 days. One person, it could take 10 days. It just depends on how they learn, what it is that they're capable of, like some people we've hired before have used our CRM before. So that onboarding is a lot faster than someone who hasn't used it. And you're just like trying to show them all the ins and the outs and the processes. So, but yeah, it's definitely a period of time, however you feel like it is, to give them the process, walk them through the process together, maybe do a shadow. And then I always do like drop-ins. Like I have like, even just through like our shared CRM email box, I just pop in and look at, are they sending the templates? Are they making it unique? Just spot checking, making sure it's happening.
But spot checking is an operations manager's job or a CEO's job. Like, you have removed yourself out of the seat of being the person who does the things. Now you're just checking that those things are happening. That's a completely different workflow than actually being responsible to complete those tasks.
And it's so, it was a really hard transition. It was a really hard transition to do it. Part of it's because I love it. Like I love the job. Like I didn't want to stop because I tired of it. It was more because I knew it was what was best for the business. Like the business needed a CEO leader. That is what they needed. They needed somebody to lead the team into the next, iteration of what our business is going to look like. And the hard part about it is that we get into this because we love our clients and we love doing these things, and you want to stay there because it's comfortable and it's fun, but you cannot grow in your business if you're in it. You just can't do it. So there comes a point where you just have to recognize that. And there's times like when October is like our crazy month, we'll have half the month is full of weddings, and I'll be like, hey, I'll just take an event, like give y'all a break. I'll do the event, and I kind of get my fill. Get to meet the client and hang out and like do the old things, whatever. And normally I have a list of things in the venue that need to get fixed or changed, the next morning, but regardless.
Oh yeah. You show up immediately. It's like, oh, whoops, we need this. And oh yeah, why hasn't, oh yeah. Yep. The laundry list.
Get a list on Monday. But yeah, so, but it's hard. It's hard to take that step back, but it's also something that I feel like is so needed. And I think it really allows you to flex those entrepreneur muscles, a CEO muscle. And it really allows you to think about, okay, what's the next thing you want to do? What's the next thing that, you want to like focus on?
Yeah. Dana, can I add something to the SOPs and like creating that?
Yeah.
So something for us that hurt us really bad very early on was I heard someone talk about SOPs and creating SOPs. And I got so excited about it that I went overboard. And what I mean by this is I immediately went out and invested in a fairly expensive piece of software to help us document all of the processes. I also felt like I was going to be the one to do all the processes, but because I was doing it across, at the time, 5 venues, I couldn't actually execute that. And so there was no person that was actually in charge of getting that system rolled out. And so I guess the piece that I wanted to add, and for anyone listening or watching this, who's feeling like maybe that was the unlock for them in their business, do exactly what Dana said and make it simple. Use a Google Doc, use your phone, have someone filming you. Don't find a fancy, cool system. Don't start breaking it down with AI. It's so difficult to do. And I know that my first thing is want to use all the fancy, fun tools and the things. But if you just have a clearly written down process based on exactly what you do, you'll be in such a better place. And then later you can make it fancy. Later you can add all the bells and whistles.
And it's, I also say the famous quote of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? We just focused on one area. I just focused on the thing that I needed, that I was hiring, that I knew I was going to hiring first. Right. And I just focused on those processes and got that down. And then I went to the next one. And then we're still adding stuff sometimes. Oh, this happened. Maybe we need to figure out how to make that not happen again. Let's talk about that. Is that something that we're missing? Did we miss a step in this, in our workflow or whatever? So just one step at a time. You can't, it's tempting to go and be I'm going to write SOPs for everything and it's going to be great. But really, you got to get your team on board. So it's going to be a slow burn. But to me, when I talk to new venue owners, I said, if you're in that 0 to 3 years, think about where you want to be in 5 years, and you don't want to be here in 5 years. So now is the time to start thinking as you're rolling out, as you're the one doing all the things, write down everything you're doing, write down that process, and it'll change and it'll evolve over time, but it'll give you a great foundation to be able to give up the reins and be able to hire somebody.
Totally. I love that you mentioned this too. I actually just yesterday created a video about venue DNA. And, our DNA as humans, it's so similar, right? 99.9% similar to other humans, but we look different, we talk different, we act differently. We are very different people. And similarly, our venue, there might be things that are similar to other venues, but things are very different. And you have to have the systems in place to map towards the direction that you want to be in 3 to 5 years. You can't start with something, whether that's a loan or whether that's if you have a loan and you have a payment, you need to have the sales that can come in that can support paying that payment and still hiring employees if your end goal is to not be wearing all the hats. So these are just things that you have to think about. I wanted to ask, you mentioned the peanut butter story. Could you just very quickly recap that for anyone who's not familiar?
Came from, but it's this tactic I guess people take that they say, tell me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And you typically start out take the peanut butter and put it on the sandwich. And so someone will take the little jar of peanut butter and put it on the bread. But they're trying to get you down to take out the bread, untwist the tie from the bread, take out 2 pieces of bread, lay out the 2 pieces of bread, take out the peanut butter, a very specific step-by-step rules, or I guess a process for it.
So I did this. I tried this with my son, my oldest son, and he is extremely analytical. And without any prompting, he just was you're going to open the bag of bread. You're going to take out the bread. You're going to get a knife. You're going to use the knife to get the peanut butter. He knew, he was in the zone already. For me, I did exactly what you said. I mean, I was putting the peanut butter. I was the one that process, that story is for. But that, I think, brings up an interesting point. Our team often processes things. Some team members process things much faster than others. Some team members, it takes more explaining and a little bit more of a process to kind of get them there. Do you use anything in terms of a personality or aptitude test or anything like that to judge kind of who you're getting when they're walking in the door?
100%. I am the biggest fan of the Enneagram. I don't even remember the first time I heard the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 8. wing 9, and there has been nothing in my life that has described me more than an Enneagram 8. Like, it is just like unlocking all the things. And the cool thing was, is it made me really understand so much of who I am and why I manage the way that I manage. Whereas before there was a lot of shame, like in being, because Enneagram 8s are considered the challenger. So they're very like, they don't like to let go of control. They're like initial, like they're like in the gut triad. So their first inclination is to rise to anger, which is very much me. I get frustrated very easily. But I'm very particular. I guess you could say I'm type A. I'm not perfectionist. I'm very particular. I care a lot about how my name is represented. So I care a lot about what my people are doing. And there is a lot of shame involved in that, partially probably from like, you can go back to your childhood of being called bossy or whatever the case may be, right? But the Enneagram really showed me that it's just who I am. It just is part of my personality from all the reasons of what it is, how it developed, that is just who I am. And it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's something to say, hey, how can I use this piece to be amazing at what I do? And I realized like, okay, yeah, I'm particular, but I can give some killer instructions, right? And that is beneficial. And so we make all of our employees take an Enneagram test. We actually make them take it when we interview them. Not that it's an end all be all, but we have like red flags of clashing personalities, right? And truly the Enneagram will tell you like no personalities actually clash, because everyone should be in like this, Zen mental state, which, that's like not ever going to happen. Everyone's going to be in a Satan Zen mental state. But in the past, you've noticed, hey, like I really struggle to manage this kind of a person. And no fault to them. That's just me. And I'm not changing. Like I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm the one here. But we do. And it helps us really understand like how to give feedback, how to say thank you, how to give them instruction. So like if I have, a perfectionist on my team, I am giving them the peanut butter instructions 100%. Because if I don't, they're going to ask for it. Like they're going to say, okay, but what do you mean here? Okay, but what do you mean here? You said to do this, but really should it be this? Like, so it helps me understand more of how to communicate with them. I love it. A lot of people use Myers-Briggs. That's great too, but that's my go-to.
Yeah, I love it. We use a predictive index, and that one is very similar, but kind of understanding the personality profile, the aptitude profile, and how that matches in with the role that you need them to execute. And then, yeah, totally, you're right. Who else is on the team? I mean, that makes a big difference. And you could have someone who maybe is a great fit for a different team, and they have the aptitude and some of the skills, but on your team, because of uniquely who you are as a team, it maybe will cause a little bit of friction or, yeah. So I love that. That's a super practical tip for everyone. Let's wrap up today with talking about, if let's say you're a venue owner, you've started down this path of, SOPs, documentation, and you're hiring employees and bringing people on, but maybe you have some employees who are part of the old way of doing things, right? And they're really struggling to get on board. Have you found an effective way to kind of break through that and get them on board and kind of have that, like, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, like come to Jesus moment to like, hey, this is the new way we're doing it? Or do these situations usually revolve or result in that person needing to find another job? Great question.
Because we actually just went through this summer. So we hired a COO in January. And so to really get in, so I could genuinely 100%, like, we had a venue manager and whatnot, but I wanted a COO that was handling all the other businesses and whatnot. And so she came in the first 5 months and she just kind of observed, like, paid attention. And then come January, she had a whole list of things that she wanted to change. Recognizing that the team is a little resistant to change, we started kind of rolling out those things and we started getting a lot of pushback for it. And a lot of it was just the way the process we were doing things was different. And so we had what we called a team reset day. And we went outside of the office. We rented like a conference room somewhere. We had breakfast and lunch brought in. And we basically just said, this is a reset. Like, what was the past is the past. This is the new company moving forward. And our biggest mistake before that was really not being transparent about the why. And so a really big part of our business is about philanthropy. We are huge philanthropists. We love to give back to the community. And there were a couple of things that we had done in the venue that the team did not understand why we were doing it. And it really tied back to this passion of giving back. And so once we said, hey, remember, here's our mission statement. Here's how we have agreed to service our clients. Here's what we value. And here's all these things that we want to change and how that matches. Right? We are not just saying that we are a company that gives back to our community. We are physically giving back to our community, right? We are actually doing the things that we're doing. And this is why this change is happening. And so we did that as a reset. Then we had one-on-ones with each person and said, here's what's going to change in your job description. Here's what's going to change in your schedule. And, this is a safe space to tell me what you like, don't like. And we didn't. And at the time when we walked into that meeting as the C-level group, our CFO, COO, CEO, we said, if someone comes to us and says, this is not okay. This is not what I signed up for. Then we were prepared to offer a severance package at that point, because that was a non-negotiable. That's just how it was going to go. But we needed to give a lot of employees just need the space to air how they feel, say I don't like vents. It's this is how I feel. You made me feel a certain kind of way, and I didn't like this or that. And you're like, that's totally fair. I understand, and be able to talk through it. And we end up retaining everybody. Nobody dropped off. And it's been amazing since. It's been such this thing that has so much anxiety going into it of having to make these changes. They've embraced, they've pivoted, they've changed. And sure, there's been some bumps, but we were able to they understood the heart behind it and the why behind it. And I think that's the biggest difference when you talk about small business and corporate. Corporate doesn't care about how you feel. They don't care about the emotions of it. But we as small business owners, we care a lot. We care a lot about the people we employ. They become part of our family. And so it becomes really hard when there is that friction there. But a lot of times, just like family, you sit them down and say hey, this is why we're doing this. This is my passion. This is my vision. This is what we value. And I know that you value this too. I know this is your heart. I know this is what you want. And this is why we're doing this. And, you kind of get to that point where everyone kind of gets on board the train and it's good. So I think it's okay to say hey, the way we did it for 3 years rocked. It was great. It was wonderful. But we need to change a couple of things. And I think that was the hardest thing, because the team thought nothing needed to change. They're we're great. Everything's fine. Are you now telling me I can't do my job well? Are you telling me that I'm failing? It just became such a personal attack on them. And I didn't even cross my mind that that's what they would think of. I was no, but we have to change with the times. We have to see where the future is going. And this is going to prepare us to be successful in the future. So I definitely recommend it.
I love that. I love that so much. Honestly, we need to do a better job there, just as our organization, because I'm with you. Sometimes I don't realize the impact that it will have on the team. In my mind, I'm in this state of constant improvement and okay, how are we going to do better? But you try to just say, hey guys, we're making a change. Oh, we're making a change. Oh, we're making a change. And it feels like the other side of that coin is you're doing a bad job or something's broken. And I don't live as much in a world of things are broken, let's fix them. Things are okay, let's do better. Is kind of where I'm coming from. But I think sometimes I struggle communicating that to the team. And so they feel oh, I messed up. I must have messed up because, and that's a lack of communication. Dana, I said that was the last thing. I want to ask one more piece here. What's your take on balancing love and passion and care for your team and care for your venue, and then kind of this cold hard numbers and service delivery and metrics and that side of business, especially when early on you may be the one who is the direct manager of your team. And so you are both the one that gives the raises and does the terminations. And you're the one who encourages them and then also tells them they're not doing great. How do you, I don't want to say it's a Jekyll and Hyde effect, but how do you create trust and love and buy-in on the team when, as the CEO of the business, you kind of do have to have this authoritarian, hey, we got to stick with this. These are the metrics you're going to be accountable for. like that side, and then also like, hey, let's get together and do something fun?
Yeah. I think we did it very terribly in the beginning. I think we were very much more on the let's get together and be fun. And I was afraid to hurt your feelings. And I was afraid to be the boss because I cared so much. And the thing I love about turnover is it allows you to try it again. And so in 2019, we had a huge turnover. We had like almost all of our people left, like just due to like life, jobs, whatever, and we had a whole new team. And so we're like, you know what, we're going to approach this differently. And so they definitely know I'm their boss. Like they know I'm their boss. We have a relationship where I care about them. Like I ask about them. We celebrate birthdays together. Like we do all those things. But to me, the biggest piece for a boss is you have to be transparent. And to be transparent is not just transparent when things are bad, but transparent when things are good. So when they're doing a good job, you are spending just as much time like affirming them as you are correcting them. A lot of times we only pop in when something's wrong. And so we forget that people need to hear the good all along, and it builds that trust. So then for me, what I've noticed is the more that I'm able to give them a positive feedback, because they see, oh, well, you're invested in me. Like you want to see me be successful. So I have more people that come to my office, and before I can even point out what they're doing wrong, they're telling me what they're doing wrong. They're like, hey, like I didn't hit my sales goal this month, and I think this could be it. I'm not sure, but can we have some one-on-one time? Can we like shadow my tour? Like they're actively trying to fix it because they understand that they have to hit that metric, right? That there's two things. It's either you are failing because you do not have the ability, the skills, whatever, or you're failing because you don't have the leadership. Two different things. There's really not much in the middle. So I think that is where you have to create that space of trust. It's just by being transparent and saying like, you're not going to lose your job because you didn't make your sales goal this month, but you most certainly are going to lose your job if you don't go to tours and you don't show up and you like have all these egregious things. But giving them the space to ask for help. And that's been a huge game changer for us, like massive.
I love that. This has been so practical and so tactical. And I appreciate this so much because, it's obvious you're in the trenches. You have been in the trenches. You're also normalizing, some of the learning curve and some of the failures and some of the process. And if you're listening to this or watching this right now and you're going through this struggle with an employee, there's nothing wrong with you. Like you're doing exactly what you need to be doing and taking Dana's advice and kind of growing your knowledge and learning about how to run a better operation. This is the unlock. I mean, this is how you get to working not just in, but on your business and running a really successful company. I love this, Dana. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, this really has. So just really quick to let everyone know, January 6th, 7th, 8th, venue masterclass. It's in
Durham, North Carolina. Yep, Carolina.
Durham? Okay. Perfect. And we're going to put the links to everything so that you can go check out what you're doing in the description of the video. I think did you do a special code?
Do have a special for you guys.
Ooh, okay. Tell us about it. I think it's a 30% off. Am I correct?
Yeah, 30% off for all Venue RX listeners.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. And again, thank you for taking the time to put this on. I know putting on events like this, I was at Wedding MBA, as were you a couple weeks ago. And, I was talking with someone and they were, I think, a little upset about how the event producers had done something. And I definitely empathized with them because I could see they were 100% on point. But at the same time, we aren't throwing a event with 5,000, 6,000, 4,000, however many people were at that show. And there are so many complications and it's easy to be kind of critical from the cheap seats. And so I just want to applaud what you're doing. Thanks for creating an event like this. And if you're interested and you want to check this out, I highly recommend going and using the code and go see Dana and some great speakers out there in Raleigh at the beginning of the year. I'm not Raleigh, Durham.
Well, it's very close. It's Raleigh, Durham is the normal saying. So you're not too far off there.
Amazing. Awesome. Dana, thank you so much for today. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Hey friends, Jonathan here. Just want to take a moment and share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. We are really excited to be consulting with a few more companies this year, and we've done it in the past successfully, and it's been such a blast. So this year, we want to take on a couple more consulting clients. Unfortunately, because of the venues that we currently manage and the intention and the focus that we have on that, we're only able to take on a limited amount, but we do have a couple slots for venues. So if you are interested, we have both 90 and 120-day programs available, or we can come in and partner with you on marketing, sales, operations, and help fine-tune any of the systems that are in those categories. So if you are interested in that, we would absolutely love to hear from you and see if there's a way that we could partner with you and serve you at your venue. Go ahead, fill out the link that is in the description in this video or podcast. You can also just send us an email at venues@cseventservices.com, and we'd love to chat with you. All right, back to the show.